What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. Hopefully, you guys having a good day so far. If you guys are watching this video and you guys saw the thumbnail and you guys think, oh, Boozy Man's gonna be out of a job, gonna be out of content creation, Plarium's gonna die, Raid's gonna die, well, this video is going to talk about how Raid has been doing since they've been acquired by MTG Media Group. If you guys didn't know, Raid used to be owned by a slot machine company who specializes in gambling games online. But their main business was actually physical slot machines that we see in, various different places and casinos and all that stuff. Well, they sold the company, Aristocrat, they sold the company Plarium to another company based out of Sweden. They're called MTG Group, which is a media group. This is like a conglomerate of a bunch of different businesses, but their main focus actually around a lot of it is around games. So it's the first year that they've been under that new company, new ownership. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of cover this quarter to see exactly what Plarium has been up to under their new management, how they are doing, and if I will indeed need to get a real job. No, I'm just kidding. I actually work full time as well, and I do content creation on the side. But it's also very interesting to see how Plarium is actually doing on the back end. So I got a couple of reports and slides here that I want to show you guys just to illustrate what is actually happening at Plarium. So let's follow along here a little bit. So first up, we got Google Trends. So this is a very generic kind of look at Plarium and Raid. Just from a general sentiment standpoint. It doesn't really show you any kind of raw numbers or anything like that, but it shows you the search frequency of Raid Shadow Legends and at which point did it actually peaked or if interest is actually dropping off. These are relative numbers, so they actually don't give you like hard numbers of how frequent people actually look for the game Raid Shadow Legends, but you can kind of see here throughout the last year. So this is from today up until a year ago. General interest for Raid Shadow Legends, the game, has been mostly stagnant. Now, this peak here is actually the Lemonisi login event. So I looked this up and I was like, what happened here that generated so much interest? It was the Lemonisi, free login champion. And there was also that Chaos Awakes campaign that was happening with Karosa. So that was happening throughout the summer. And then we have the Ninja Turtles that was happening around this part. So Ninja Turtles peaked around this little bump here, kind of stagnated a little bit. And then we had a big uptick here. And this is when the Predator and Alien collab, and of course, Christmas time and stuff like that. So people, generally a little bit more active during the holidays. And then into the first little bit here of 2026, where the Assassin's Creed stuff started happening. And then it starts tapering off as, the months wear on. But you can kind of see here from this Google Trends that it shows that Raid Shadow Legends doesn't really fall off. For the most part, it just maintains a pretty steady, level of popularity with just the general masses on Google. Now, in contrast, I'll show you guys a game that is actually dying or dead. They actually declared that they're going to be running out of service at the end of March. So this is the kind of interest over time for like a dying game. So here we peaked interest early on in 2025, and then it's just a steady decrease of interest over time until right here, it's basically dead. End of service for this game, King Arthur. A little bit unfortunate. I didn't enjoy playing the game, but yeah, it's dead now. But this is like the general graph for like a dying game. So for Raid is definitely not a dying game. If anything, they're just holding their steady in terms of search results, which is great because you don't want to invest in a game that's going to have their lights turned off and then all your money investment in your accounts and whatnot go up in smoke. So it's good to see that Raid is holding steady. Now let's get into the nitty gritty here and let's talk about some numbers. How well is Raid actually doing? Search results are good, are steady, but are they actually still, trending upward for making money, or are they actually trending downwards? So we actually have a full year of results, which give you a pretty good outlook. Things are properly integrated now. So let's take a look here. So we got the first results here for 2025. So this is the Q4. Now we also have the Q1 for 2026, and you guys are going to be super interested in those numbers here. Now I'm not going to bore you guys with all the nitty gritty details here, but I'm going to show you guys the most relevant stuff. And that's going to be right here. Reported sales by franchises. So we got Plarium here. Plarium by itself, right? So Plarium is making money. So the Q1 2025 is when they first were picked up officially by the MTG. So they've had 4 quarters of results. Every single quarter, guys, they have been increasing their total revenue, total sales in this game. And you know what? Raid Shadow Legends is the biggest driver of all this. So a little bit of commentary here from the report. Plarium's flagship game, Raid Shadow Legends, had a highly successful end to the year, driven by a very active schedule of live ops. Live ops basically means like the in-game events and content, culminating in the game recording a daily all-time high revenue during December. I don't know what day that could have been. It was probably the Primal Shard event or the multi-day or the multi 2x shard event over the weekends. I'm not too sure which day in December that they said they got record sales, but some day in December they broke the top. As a result, the team delivered a quarter in line with the game's very strong performance in Q4 2024. So Q4 was their best quarter. You can kind of see there. This is measured in Swedish kronas. One Swedish krona is worth about 11 cents US. So if you do like a 10-to-1 conversion, you kind of get roughly the amount in US dollars. Key in-game initiatives during Q4 included the IP partnership of Alien vs. Predator in November, together with an active pipeline of in-game events. The game also ran Black Friday sale with dedicated art and offers to support player progression. In addition, the game hosted 2 fusion events, Oktoberfest and Christmas and New Year, which include tournaments and new heroes. So we had the Deck of Fate for Hilvi. I'm sure that was a huge success. We had the 5-star Soul event for Hilvi. We had the 5-star Soul event for the Predator. We had Yuki Masa as the Christmas fusion. So there was a lot going on in December. Raid had very strong business momentum going into 2026, kicking off the year by launching the IP partnership with the iconic Assassin's Creed franchise. Plarium's overall revenues declined by single digits year over year in Q4 on a comparable basis due to lower revenues from other titles. So you can kind of see here, there's a little bit of commentary basically says every other game that Plarium has besides Raid is losing money, but Raid is making money. So it's kind of crazy. But honestly, that's the story of Raid. Every single year, Raid has no breaks. It's just unstoppable train. So some glowing words there for Raid in particular. Just a little bit for interest's sake, Plarium is releasing a couple of games, I guess, in the near future, to be announced, and then Elf Islands. So just a little bit of tidbit information for you guys to see what's going on in the future. Here's something else that might be of interest for you guys. Daily active user levels were up 50% year over year in Q4, driven primarily by strong year over year daily active user growth in our word game franchise due to successful scaling and new games, blah, 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 and the consolidation of Plarium from February 1st, 2025. Daily active users were up 6% sequentially from the third quarter, driven by growing player base to our casual games, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what they're saying here about Plarium. So average revenue per daily player has grown by 23% year over year. This reflecting the consolidation of Plarium and slightly higher levels in tower defense, offset somewhat by blah, 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 blah. The group's top 3 largest games in Q4 were Raid Shadow Legends, Forge of Empires, and Warhammer 40,000. These games account for 50% of the group's total revenue in the fourth quarter, compared to 51% in the third quarter. There's a mention here about direct-to-consumer revenues. I'm not too sure what this means from like a Raid standpoint, but apparently this is a big driver in overall revenue for Raid. So they just launched this direct payments in Raid Shadow Legends. It's direct consumer revenue. I'm not too sure what that means. And then they also mentioned that Raid has increased user acquisition investments in Q4 to capitalize on positive momentum. Total group user acquisition spend was up 76% on a reported basis, up 98% year over year, driven by consolidation of Plarium. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of info to work with for this year, 2025. Looks like Plarium, majorly helped by Raid performing really, really well. The whole year they've improved in terms of how much money they're making. And because they're making more money, they're spending more money to, on their user acquisition. So now that's just a quick look at 2025. The big thing here is actually looking at quarter 1 for 2026. So let's jump into that real quick here. All right, so this is quarter 1 for 2026. And at this point, they've had, 4 complete quarters of info going into this. It's going to give us a good look at how well Raid is actually performing. Let's take a look at what the CEO has to say about this. CEO actually specifically mentions Raid Shadow Legends, which is very, very impressive. So she is saying, our mid-core district had a strong quarter 1, reporting 10% pro forma year-over-year growth. This was largely driven by Raid Shadow Legends with an exceptional 25% pro forma year-over-year growth, driven by a busy schedule of in-game content in the quarter. We're talking about quarter 1. So this is Assassin's Creed quarter, including a highly successful IP partnership in January with a very strong anniversary event in March. The release of new content for Raid Shadow Legends will be more measured in quarter 2, and the summer period, which is important for the long-term health of the game and the player base, before a step up in pace through the second half of the year. So they're saying that there's going to be more stuff happening in the second half of the year. And there's going to be potentially new content coming in quarter 2, which is going to be, I guess, the quarter that we're in right now. Anyways, it's always interesting to hear people that don't play Raid Shadow Legends talk about Raid Shadow Legends completely from a business standpoint. So it's doing great. New content's coming, right? And she says it's going to ramp up in the second half. So that's kind of good to know. Just little tidbits of information there. All right, here we go. Let's talk about Raid's performance, guys. Quarter 1, Raid Shadow Legends versus quarter 1 from last year. Look at the numbers, guys. 1.3 billion Swedish kronas versus just under 800 million Swedish kronas versus last year. It's a massive jump, guys. The first quarter of this year versus the first quarter of last year, absolutely night and day in terms of overall like total sales. So Raid is doing incredibly well. And you can kind of see like the other titles are not doing as good. Forge of Empires decreased from last year. Warhammer basically stagnant. Other games barely increasing at all versus last year. It's actually insane. So Raid absolutely killing it. A little bit of commentary here. The group's 3 largest games are Raid Shadow Legends, Forge of Empires, and Warhammer 40,000. These games accounted for 53% of the group's total revenue in the quarter. You guys might have noticed the previous quarter, in quarter 4, they represented 51% of the total revenues. So it's a slight increase on the top 3. They're definitely top heavy, leaning on just a few titles, and the rest of the titles don't really do too much. More commentary here on Raid Shadow Legends for quarter 1 2026. Raid Shadow Legends generated revenue of 1.3 billion Swedish kronas in quarter 1, delivering pro forma growth of 25% year over year. Highlights of the quarter including Assassin's Creed partnership in January, the launch of a new in-game faction, yes, the Argonauts, supported by a dedicated event, and the popular 7-year anniversary event in March. The team also continued to deploy a highly active flow of live ops. Again, these are like the events in game throughout the quarter. As a result, there were positive player dynamics across both daily average user and average revenue per daily average user. So more average users, more spending per average user during this period. Whilst the team had an exciting content release slate for the rest of 2026 and beyond, Raid's event lineup in Q1 was more intense than a typical quarter, and the release of new content will unfold at a slightly slower pace over the coming months to optimize the balance of engagement and monetization. This is crucial to ensuring the long-term health of the player base before the next step up in pace in the second half of the year. So that actually gives you a pretty nice little look at what's going to happen for the rest of the year. I mean, we don't really know much, but just the general commentary here, things are going to slow down a little bit. We're kind of seeing that maybe. I'm not too sure. Maybe they're going to do some quality of life stuff, some balance changes, some little tweaks here and there. And then in the second half of the year, things are going to ramp up again. So kind of like how last year they killed it in December. So I would expect a huge, uptick in activity near the end of the year. All right, let's move on a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about daily active users here. So daily active users were stable year over year, amounting to 4.1 million. Whilst DAU, so daily active user levels, were stable, the mid-core district, which Raid is part of, reported 29% year over year increase in average revenue per daily user. So people are spending more money. People are spending more money in game, driven by higher average revenue per daily user levels in Raid Shadow Legends and F1 Clash, offsetting lower average revenue from Forge of Empires and other games. So again, Raid players spend way more money in Raid, and it's definitely pulling up the numbers here for the other games. Okay, moving on. So the mid-core district generated 49% of revenues from direct-to-consumer sales in Q1. I'm not too sure what direct-to-consumers mean. I wish they gave an example of how that applies to Raid Shadow Legends. It went up from 49% to from 42% in Q4. This strong performance reflected the continued strategic focus on driving direct-to-consumer revenues and initiatives launched in the second half of 2025 in Raid Shadow Legends. So they've done something in the second half of Raid last year. I don't know what. I don't spend money in the game, so I really can't tell you what they added in the game to get people to spend more money. But whatever they did is a huge driver of how much money they're actually making, and it's increasing. I assume it's probably like just buying stuff like outright. Maybe it's like the champion passes, or maybe it's the champions you can buy. I'm not too sure. I'm really not too sure. If you guys are more knowledgeable about these terms, let me know in the comments below. I would be really interested to know what direct to consumer entails in Raid, and because they sound like they're really gonna nail down on that a little bit here. And then the same as before, the more money they make, the more money they spend to acquire users. We can kind of see user acquisition here. They spent 700 million Swedish kronas versus 600 million for user acquisition in the same quarter last year. But you can kind of see here the net sales just significantly higher. So, you gotta spend money to make money, basically. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully it was informative and interesting to you guys. Like I said, I wanted to cover this definitely because they've had 4 quarters of info and data to go off of, and we can pretty much say pretty confidently that ever since MTG bought Plarium from Aristocrat, they've been doing just fine. Not only that, MTG is constantly stressed that they're looking at implementing a lot of the key tools that Plarium has, especially with market analysis and all that. And they particularly like Plarium's in-game live ops and how they incorporate that into their games, and it's been working out well for Raid. So MTG definitely values a lot about Plarium, not just what Raid can bring in terms of sales and revenue, but also the tools that they have in terms of market analysis, right? So it's very interesting to see. I think obviously there's nothing wrong with Raid. Raid's going super strong. And if you guys felt that the events were coming hot and heavy, yes, they were. Yes, they were. Yes, they are. But based on the commentary that we see, we're going to see maybe a little bit of a lull in the summertime, and it's going to pick up big time near the end of the year in the second half of the year. And clearly recently they've been doing some crazy good performance in terms of just overall sales. So whatever they're doing, it's actually creating even more revenue for them. So it must be these IPs, must be all these new, accounts being generated, new players coming in. And like it or not, obviously as a seasoned player, having all these events, definitely generate money for them, right? So from a creator standpoint, it's great to see that the game that you're covering is doing well. Hopefully they take the next couple months to improve the game that they already have instead of just constantly piling on new content. I like that they have regular champion rebalances now. They just released a huge bug fix in the latest update, a bunch of quality of life features as well. So hopefully they just keep that up for the next couple months and beyond. That'll be awesome. And of course, keep things interesting with brand new content. But yeah, it's cool to see. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about all this. You guys agree, disagree? Is this kind of no surprise, no brainer? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching till the end, guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.